We work hard as physicians to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. But when it comes to our money, do we have the same condition of care? Probably not. Let's change that together. Welcome to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast, where we'll fight and advocate for your financial literacy. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Thanks for being here. Let's jump into the show. This week's episode is sponsored by CityVest. CityVest has quickly become the most popular and best way for doctors to invest in top-performing real estate private equity funds that are usually reserved for institutional investors. This unique access to investing in these institutional funds is available for the first time ever through CityVest's easy and secure online investment platform. CityVest does the hard work of conducting due diligence and vetting the investments. They even get a third-party due diligence report that is posted on their website. As a result of aggregating a several million-dollar investment amount into their access funds, CityVest gains access to investing in the institutional investment and is able to negotiate better investment terms such as a 12% preferred return. You can check them out at cityvest.com or go to the link in the show notes below. Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, we talk about 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, emotional freedom. And in that light, we talk about finances, budgeting, real estate investing, financial freedom. And so today we're going to be talking all about wealth creation and protection, as well as income strategies. So today on our guest, we have Mark Yegge, and he's the founder and CEO of Destiny Creation. He's a wealth architect, author, mentor, and fund manager. So it's going to be a fantastic conversation all about numbers, finances. So Mark, welcome.
Hey, thank you. I like the way you said it. It's going to be a fantastic conversation about numbers. That's usually when people tune out, as they hear, oh man, I got to talk about numbers. But yeah, thanks. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But the bottom line is the numbers lead to the transformation in people's lives. So that's what we want, right?
Yeah. So tell us more about Destiny Creation, how you got started, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Oh man, well, I won't give you the too long version because I don't know if we have that much time, but I'll start you. When I was 12 years old, my dad introduced me to the stock market. And so here we are 45 years later, and I'm still in it. So done a couple of things right along the way. And along the way, I've figured out, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've used those mistakes as tuition to create a system that we call the cash flow machine, which is basically like, so many people understand the concept of real estate and getting income from real estate. We get income from the stock market using stocks as the asset to create that reliable income. So that's the short version. How's that?
Yeah. And so that's interesting because, we're talking about, traditionally the stock market, people think you can only make money on the way up. They don't know about like shorting or buying puts or, call options. So, yep. Traditionally for a lot of high income earners, they just set it, forget it. So they're not really interested in the volatility, but you do that. So tell us more, more about, your clients and how you help them.
Well, we work mostly with 7 and 8 figure investors who are looking to play offense and defense in their portfolio. So we teach them if they want to learn a strategy. We also have 3 hedge funds in different sectors, but we teach them strategies on creating that income out of the stock market. So what I usually do is because it's a little bit, stock market, you can't put your hands on it, right? Real estate, you can open the door, you can walk in, you can look at the rooms. So I'll use an analogy for real estate to help you understand a little bit about what I do. Let's say that we open our window and we look across the street, and our neighbor Jim has his piece of property. He just put a sign on it, and it's maybe a city block, let's call it, and it says for sale by owner by Jim, $100,000, right? So Jim has got the property for sale, and we look out there and go, wow, he's got his product on the market. He's got the lot on the market. And there's this guy, Bob, driving down the street. Now, Bob doesn't have $100,000, but he sees this property for sale. And Bob heard a rumor right? So often we have rumors dotting our landscape in the stock market. So Bob heard this rumor that Hilton Hotels is going to build this big, gigantic skyscraper right next door, this big resort right next to Jim's lot, right across the street from us. And so Bob doesn't have the 100,000, but he knocks on the door. He finds Jim and he says, "Hey, Jim, listen, I don't have the 100,000, but I'll give you $10,000 if you take the property off the market for a few months, 6 months, and in return, you promise to sell it anytime in the next 6 months to me for $100,000." Jim goes, "Wait a minute. You're going to give me $10,000, which I get to keep. And in return, I promise to sell only you my property for the same price that I'm asking for it right now. Is that right?" Bob says, "Yep, that's right." They shake hands, they make a deal, gives him his $10,000. And now Bob is waiting for that big deal from Hilton to come in, reading in the newspaper, right? Two things can happen. Number one, that big deal can come in which case, let's say the property now becomes worth $1 million. So Bob took his $10,000 investment and he turned it into a whopping $1 million because he had that insider information. But I think you and I both know that so often information is wrong, right? If information was right and it were easy to get, we would be able to make a lot of money in the market. But since information is doubtful, the other thing normally happens, and that is it was a rumor. Hilton's not going to build a big hotel next to Jim's lot, and the option basically expires worthless. So Jim gets to keep his land, put it back up on the market for another 100,000 if he wants, but he also got $10,000 as income just because he found a gambler like Bob that was willing to gamble $10,000. And so that's what we do in the stock market. Instead of that piece of property being the asset, we might have an asset of Amazon stock or Tesla stock or Apple stock. And we find a gambler out there that's willing to speculate that it's going to go up. And if it goes up, fine, he gets to make that money on it. But if not, we get to create that income by selling that call, that option to that gambler. And the statistics are, Christopher, that 80% of the time, the buyers of options lose money. Those options expire nearly worthless. And about 20% of the time, they make the big hits. But on the other side, if 80% of the time they're losing money, that means on the other side, the seller has got a much higher probability of making that money. So that's what we do. That's my little analogy of what we do in the stock market. So
Yeah, it's so interesting. I read the book "Getting Started in Options,"
sure.
couple back in the early 2000s, and that really opened my eyes to how the stock market works, and really you can use momentum, you can long-term investing, so just depending on your needs. So
Sure.
yeah, then I love the options. You speculate, you can also you can hedge, you can also create very stable income for yourself.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that you've talked about you've actually authored books and courses including Hacking Money, Cash Flow Machine, Negotiate to Win. Tell us more about those and how they help your clients.
Yeah. So the book that we just put out in the first quarter is called The Cash Flow Machine Fundamentals. It basically talks about the strategy we just described. And you can go out. It's basically covered calls. So I know you've heard of covered calls, and I know a lot of the listeners and watchers have heard of covered calls. But anybody can go out and find a free video on YouTube about how to do covered calls. But what we have is a system for doing it. So we'll teach you if you want to learn it, if you want to be hands-on. We have a lot of physicians actually who are in our program who are hands-on. They're tired of giving their money up to somebody else, and they like the challenge of being able to create income. And so that's what that book is about. That's my fourth book that I've written. I've written books on negotiation and other books on how to structure your wealth. That's the most recent one and the most fun one because it actually teaches you the strategy of what we do. And then we have courses, an ecosystem, a mastermind, a group of people that come together on Friday and we talk about what we do, and we have a lot of fun. It's almost like a family, and so we all kind of make money together. And then I have hedge funds that help you do this if you're interested in if you don't have the time, right? You're busy doing your work. You haven't created that time freedom yet. Well, we have hedge funds that do it for you, but I love to see people learning this new philosophy and putting it into play and helping you create transformation in your life, right? And we don't try to go for the big home run like Bob driving down the street. We find that people that go for those big home runs that try to kill it in the market are the ones that generally lose. And it's the people that are fine with making that 2 to 4% a month, something like that, that starts to compound and make sense over time. And plus, you get to control it if you learn the system. So
Yeah.
we have a system that teaches you with lots of rules. The rules are there, the system is there, because emotions are the enemy of the trader, right? And I know you know this, right? I know how many people buy an investment, whether it's a stock or a piece of real estate, usually a stock because it's more liquid. And if it goes up, they take the profit off the table and they go, woo, I'm profitable. But they don't get to get the doubles and triples that might happen over, several years. On the other hand, it goes down and they'll sit there and hold it and they'll go down, they'll buy some more, right? And so they might end up holding an investment for a long period of time. And sometimes those never come back. So it's that interesting dichotomy of learning how to create how to build a system that takes the emotion out of your investment decisions and puts you back in control with a set of rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Tell us more about Wall Street's axioms that hold back our investments, and why mindset is 90% of investing.
Okay, well, great. I could go off on this thing. I come from a Wall Street background. I've been fascinated by Wall Street since I was a kid. I worked on Wall Street. I had a law firm, not a law firm, but a financial trading firm on Wall Street, which I sold to one of the big Wall Street banks years ago. And I started to realize that Wall Street's run basically by salespeople and lawyers. And don't get me wrong, I love salespeople and I love lawyers. I got some in the family, but the salespeople are there to grab your assets. So if you've got a high net worth, you've got lots of people calling to grab your assets and put them under their management, so they can make a nice management fee. And the lawyers are to make sure that the firm doesn't get sued. And so what you end up doing is you put people into average investments. Now, I don't know about you this morning, but I didn't wake up going, oh, I want to be average today, right? I want to be excellent. I want to be better than average, right? What's the joke that they did a poll of Harvard students and 90% of them said they're above average in Harvard, right? So if you start shooting for average, you end up getting an average return, and an average return over the last 100 years has been, a 9% return, let's say, in the stock market. Problem is, we don't have 100 years. So if you just started investing last year and you caught this nice 30% downdraft, or in some cases, if you own Tesla or Facebook or Netflix, they've gone down 60, 70, 80%. You've got a big downdraft that you have to dig your way out of. So Wall Street is really set up to get you in average investments. I did a study in, I think it was 2013 and 14. And the stock market during that period of time had gone up about 29%. But if you looked at that's in the S&P 500. But if you looked at the top 10 stocks in the S&P 500 for those 2 years, it was 185%. So it's the other 490 stocks that are bringing down your return. And that's just so, that you don't lose too much money so that they can start suing the Wall Street firms and they have to defend. If they get you 9% and that's what the street's getting, then everybody's happy and you're happy. But the problem is, as you know, right now, 9% barely keeps you above water in purchasing power due to inflation. So you've got to do better. You've got to unfortunately take more risk in your portfolio. Otherwise, you start to lose power to the inflationary forces that are out there. So,
it's so interesting, just hearing from somebody from Wall Street, talk about these things.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, a lot of investors, they're governed by either fear or greed. And so, like you're saying, you have to have a system and a process. And so tell us why mindset is 90% of investing.
Yeah, so mindset is really critical, and it goes back to that emotions. I always say when emotions go up, intelligence goes down. I don't know about you, but I don't make very many good decisions when I'm emotional, right? So what we have to do is get a hold, especially of investing, because we work really hard for our money. And so money is stored emotion. It's stored value with emotion. And if you start to operate from fear and greed, you end up making invariably the wrong decisions. So what you have to do is you have to set up axioms, rules to be able to govern those decisions. So when you have a set of systems or a set of rules from a system that have been tested over time, you can have certainty it's going to work every time, but that you get the probabilities in your favor, right? And that's all we want. Is we want, when you buy a stock or when you buy any investment, there's a seller and a buyer. You each have a 50% chance at that moment of being right. Usually when you're buying a stock, there's a seller on the other end that's got way more money than you and a lot more intelligence and research than you, right? Intel, I mean, not just that kind of intelligence, but they have some big advantages. So you have to do some things to get your advantages in your favor. And one of those is having a strategy. And the other one is seeing what they do and following along with the big money, right? The big money makes the good decisions. And generally they can drive things one way or the other. So all of these things lead to having axioms and systems in place so that you don't make lousy decisions. Because I can tell you that your mind starts to mess with you when you're in the middle of an investment, you see it moving down and you start to panic. Oh no, I'm going to lose this money. And so you hit the sell button. And that's the exact time you should have been buying. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a really fascinating conversation. A lot of most high income earners, physicians, high net worth, they really love real estate because of they can see it, they can feel it. But here's another way to monetize have another income stream. So, and
Yep.
a lot of listeners are interested in your story, following you, contacting you. So how can they do that?
Oh, well, thank you. They can go to one of my websites. It's go.destinycreation.com and then go to /physicians. And we'll set up a special link for this podcast. I'll have a white paper that I'll put out there that you can read kind of a little bit about what we do, see if that's interesting for you. But certainly you can poke around there and learn a bunch of stuff. That's kind of a good starting spot for what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for all the listeners out there, Mark's resources will be in the links in the show notes. I really love talking about investing and just all the different strategies and so many options out there. So thanks so much, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to hearing from your future successes.
Thank you. I'll leave you with this. It's my favorite saying. It's never give up your power in your health, your wealth, or your time. Thanks for having me. It was nice to see you.
I'm excited that you made it for another episode. You are truly the best. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that my passion is to bring you the education you need to find your path to financial freedom. Please come back week after week for new content, new resources, and great guests. Until then, if you haven't already, please be sure to check out the website, www.drchrislumdphd.com for more support. I'll see you next week.